Welcome back to the Deep End. We are diving into a story today that is honestly a little hard to believe,
Oh, I know this one. Yeah.
mostly because of how completely the world seems to have forgotten it. And I don't mean forgotten like some obscure trivia fact. I mean forgotten like, I don't know, imagine if 50 years from now nobody knew who the Beatles were.
That's surprisingly close to the scale of what we're talking about. It's a genuine disappearing act from the public
It
consciousness.
really is. We are talking about a man who, in the year 1910, was cited in academic journals more often than Aristotle,
Which is just staggering.
more than Immanuel Kant,
Ugh.
more than Hegel.
I mean, think about that. For anyone who follows philosophy or intellectual history, that statistic is it's mind-bending. Aristotle had a 2,000-year head start. Kant is, the very bedrock of modern thought. And this guy, Henri Bergson, was beating them both in the citation metrics of his day.
He was a global superstar.
Mhm.
And I want to set the scene here, because the research notes describe something called the Bergson craze.
Oh.
And we are not talking about a few dusty academics nodding in a library. We are talking about gridlock in Paris.
Right, this was at the Collège de France.
Yeah.
The crowds were so enormous that people were lining up hours in advance just to get a seat. Hours. And you had students, sure, but you also had these fashionable society ladies sending their servants ahead of them to hold seats for them.
No way.
Yes, you had tourists putting his lectures on their itinerary right next to the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre. It was a cultural event.
The notes even say people were fainting from the heat inside the lecture hall.
They were packed in like sardines. People were peering in through the windows just to try and hear him. And what were they there for?
Not a rock concert.
Yo.
Huh.
All to hear a man talk about metaphysics, time, and the soul. It wasn't a political rally. It was a philosophy lecture.
That is just, it's bizarre to me. In today's world, we have celebrity intellectuals, I guess people with big podcasts or YouTube channels, but I can't imagine people fainting in a lecture hall to hear about the nature of time.
Yeah.
Why him? What was going on?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it really sets up the mission of this deep dive. To understand why Henri Bergson became the voice of an era, you have to look at what that era was feeling.
Okay.
1910 is the peak of the industrial age. Everything is becoming mechanized. The world is speeding up. You have factories, trains, telegraphs. And there's this growing anxiety that human beings are just becoming cogs in a machine.
We were feeling dehumanized by our own technology.
Yeah.
The story we know all too well today.
Exactly. And then Bergson steps onto the stage, literally, and tells everyone, no, you are not a machine. You are a creative, flowing force.
Wow.
He tells them, the clock on the wall is a lie. Your soul is free. He offered a philosophical lifeline to a society that was, frankly, drowning in mechanism.
So he was the antidote to the industrial grind.
He was the champion of life, messy, unpredictable, creative life against mechanism.
Yeah.
That's the static, rigid, scientific analysis that tries to freeze everything and pin it down.
I love that framing. Life versus the machine. It feels incredibly relevant right now, considering we're all worried about AI and algorithms predicting our every move.
It's arguably more relevant now than it was in 1910. Bergson is making a massive comeback today precisely because we are hitting the limits of that mechanical worldview all over again.
So let's unpack this forgotten giant. Who was Henri Bergson? Because looking at his background, he seems like a man who didn't quite belong anywhere, but also belonged everywhere at the same time.
That's a really great way to put it. He was a true cosmopolitan before that was really a buzzword. He was born in Paris in 1859.
1859. That's a significant year, isn't it? I feel like I should know that.
It is the year Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Wow. That feels like destiny, given how much Bergson would eventually wrestle with evolution.
It does seem written in the stars, doesn't it? But his family background is this fascinating cocktail of European cultures. His father, Mikhail Bergson, was a Polish-Jewish composer and pianist. The family name was originally Bergson. They were a very prominent, wealthy, entrepreneurial family of Polish descent.
And his mother. Who is she?
Catherine Levinson. She came from an English-Jewish and Irish-Jewish background, and because of her, Bergson spoke English almost as a first language.
So he was bilingual from the start.
Pretty much. The family actually lived in London for a few years after he was born, before they settled back in France. He didn't even become a naturalized French citizen until he was nearly 9 years old.
So he's got this cross-cultural foundation. Polish, English, Irish, French, Jewish. He's viewing Europe from multiple angles simultaneously.
And he's sitting at the intersection of different worlds socially, too. I mean, did you see the notes on his sister?
I did, and I had to double-check it because I thought it was a typo. Mina Bergson.
Yes, Mina. She also went by the name Moyna Mathers.
As in the wife of Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers.
The very same. The founder of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
That's wild. The Golden Dawn is legendary in occult circles. You have W.B. Yeats involved, Aleister Crowley later on, and Henri Bergson's sister is essentially the high priestess.
It's an incredible contrast, isn't it? On one side of the channel, you have Mina exploring the mystical, magical, hidden side of reality through ritual and occultism. And back in Paris, her brother Henri is exploring the hidden side of reality through rigorous academic philosophy.
They're both chasing the same thing.
Exactly, the unseen, but using completely different tools.
And speaking of connections, there was another one in the notes that blew my mind. The literary connection.
Oh, the wedding, yes.
Yeah.
So Bergson married Louise Neuberger in 1891, and the best man at their wedding was none other than Marcel Proust.
The In Search of Lost Time guy. The ultimate novelist of memory.
The man who wrote the longest and perhaps most famous novel about memory and time in history. Louise was actually Proust's cousin.
It really paints a picture of the Parisian elite. It's like a small town where the mayor is Proust and the sheriff is Bergson.
It really was.
But it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Proust's work is all about how a smell or a taste, the Madeleine, can trigger this flood of involuntary memory, which is exactly what Bergson was theorizing about.
They were definitely drinking from the same cultural well. But before Bergson became the philosopher of memory and time, he was almost lost to the sciences.
Right. He was one of those annoying kids who was good at everything.
Duckles. Yes, exactly. At the Lycée Fontaine, he was a star pupil. He won a prize for scientific work, but then at 18, he wins this prestigious national prize for solving a mathematical problem. It was so impressive that it was published in the Nouvelle Annales de Mathématiques.
So he could have been a top-tier mathematician.
Oh, easily. He could have been a physicist or a mathematician. In fact, his teachers were dismayed when he chose the humanities.
Really?
They told him, and this is a quote, "You could have been a mathematician. You will be nothing but a philosopher."
Ouch. That's a sick burn in 19th century academia.
But this background is absolutely crucial. Bergson wasn't some airy-fairy poet who didn't understand science. He understood the math better than most. He chose philosophy because he felt the math was missing something essential.
And that choice seems to stem from a crisis he had as a teenager.
Right. It did, a very profound one. Between the ages of 14 and 16, Bergson lost his faith. He'd received a traditional Jewish religious education, but then, like many in his generation, he encountered the theory of evolution.
The 1859 bombshell comes back.
Exactly. The idea that humanity shared ancestry with primates, that we were the result of natural selection other than some divine molding to a teenage boy in the 1870s, this just seemed to imply that there was no creative deity, no spirit, just biology.
That's a heavy realization. It's the moment the magic drains out of the world for a lot of people.
It was a profound moral crisis for him. And in a way, you can view his entire subsequent career, all the books, all the lecturdom, as an attempt to solve that very problem.
He wanted to save the soul from the microscope.
That's perfectly put. He wanted to find a way to accept the truth of evolution and science, but to still find room for creativity, for spirit, and for freedom. And to do that, he had to attack the very foundation of how science measures the world. He had to attack our concept of time.
Okay, let's get into this, because this is the core of his philosophy. And I'll be honest, when I first read about duration, I struggled to wrap my head around it.
It's not intuitive at first because we're so trained to think the exact opposite way.
Right. To me, time is a line. It's a ruler. I have a watch.
Yeah.
It ticks. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. They're all the same size. They're all distinct. If I don't treat time like a line, I miss my dentist appointment.
So what is Bergson's problem with clocks?
Chuckles. Well, he doesn't have a problem with clocks for catching trains or going to the dentist. He knows we need clock time to organize society.
Okay, good.
But he argues that we have made a fatal mistake. We have confused the measurement of reality with the reality itself.
Meaning what, exactly? Meaning that the map is not the territory. Bergson calls our standard view of time spatialized time. Think about that ruler you mentioned. That is a spatial object. You are taking the concept of space, where things are separate, distinct, and sit next to each other, and you are projecting it onto time.
Okay, I see that. I visualize time as a timeline, left to right, Past, present, future.
Right, like beads on a string.
Yeah.
Bead A is the past, bead B is the present, bead C is the future. They're separate little units. But Bergson asks a simple question. Is that how you actually experience time?
I mean, things happen in sequence, one after another.
They happen in sequence, yes, but are they separate? Let's use the analogy he loved to use. A melody.
Okay, a melody.
When you listen to a song, say a symphony or even a pop song, you hear a note, then you hear the next note. Do you hear them as isolated, distinct atoms of sound? Note A, stop. Note B, stop.
No, of course not. If I did, it wouldn't be music. It would just be noise. The notes blend together. The feeling of the first note lingers and colors how I hear the second note.
Exactly. They interpenetrate. They melt into one another. You cannot separate the past moment of the melody from the present moment without destroying the melody itself. The past is flowing into the present. It's a continuous, flow.
So it's not beads on a string.
No. Think of it more like a snowball rolling down a hill.
A snowball.
Yes. As a snowball rolls, it picks up snow. The snow it picked up at the very top of the hill is still there, isn't it? It's pressed into the center, affecting the shape and the trajectory of the snowball right now at the bottom. The snowball is its past, accumulating into the present.
That's actually a really helpful image. So the past isn't gone. It's not behind me on the timeline. It's rolled up inside the now.
Precisely. And that continuous, fluid, indivisible flow, that is what Bergson calls duration, or in French, la durée.
So duration is time as we live it, inside our own heads.
Yeah.
Subjective time.
It is time as it exists in consciousness, yes. But he would argue it's more real than clock time. It is, to use his technical definition, unextended yet heterogeneous.
Unextended yet heterogeneous. Okay, let's translate that into human speak.
Unextended means it doesn't take up space. You can't lay a ruler next to it. Heterogeneous means it's full of different qualities. Feelings, memories, sounds, colors, all mixing together. You can't freeze it to analyze it without killing it. If you freeze a melody, it's not a melody anymore. It's just a dot on a page of sheet music.
Okay, I'm with you on the experience part. I get it. But why does this matter? Why were people fainting in the aisles over this specific idea?
Because of free will.
Go on.
In the late 19th century, science was getting very, very cocky. The determinists were arguing that because the universe is just matter and math, everything is predetermined. If time is just beads on a string, then bead A hits bead B, which then has to hit bead C. It's just cause and effect.
Right, the old argument. If you knew the position of every atom in the universe at the Big Bang, you could calculate that I would eat a turkey sandwich for lunch today.
Exactly. That is the mechanical nightmare. It means you are a robot. Your feeling of choice is a complete illusion.
And Kant, the great Immanuel Kant, didn't help much with this problem, did he?
Yeah. No. Kant wanted to save free will, but he basically retreated. He said, okay, science is right about the physical world. Cause and effect rules everything here. So free will must exist in some other realm, a noumenal world outside of time and space. It was a surrender. He put free will in a do-not-touch box that science couldn't get to.
And Bergson comes along and says they are both wrong.
Bergson says the determinists are wrong because they are using the wrong map. They are trying to map the fluid, snowballing soul onto rigid, spatial time. It doesn't fit. He says free will is pure mobility. It exists within duration.
Because the snowball is unpredictable. It's not just following a straight line.
Because the snowball is an act of creation. The present moment in duration is not just a rearrangement of the past. It is the accumulation of the entire past bubbling up into something completely new, something unforeseeable. The future is not given in advance. We create it as we go.
That is actually incredibly liberating. It means we aren't just playing out a pre-written script.
It was a radical defense of human creativity against the machine. And what's so fascinating is that the physicist eventually caught up with him.
How so?
Louis de Broglie, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, noted later that Bergson's work in his thesis, Time and Free Will, from 1889, actually predated the uncertainty principles of quantum physics by 40 years.
Yeah.
Yes. Bergson was saying you can't pin down a moment of consciousness without changing it, without killing its mobility. 40 years later, Heisenberg says you can't pin down an electron's position and its momentum at the same time without fundamentally changing it. Bergson sensed the limits of the mechanical worldview before the physicists had the math to prove it.
Wow. That brings us to the tool we use to understand all this. Because if our intellect, our logical, analytical brain is obsessed with cutting things into pieces and freezing them, how do we grasp this fluid, snowballing reality?
This is the great battle in his philosophy, the battle between intellect and intuition. And he's very, very specific about what he means by these terms.
Let's start with intellect. Bergson doesn't hate the intellect, does he? He's not anti-science.
No, not at all. He acknowledges that the intellect is a brilliant evolutionary tool. It evolved for our survival. It helps us hunt, build bridges, organize tribes.
It's practical. It's for getting things done.
It is intensely practical. But how does it work? It works by taking snapshots of reality. It throws an abstract net over the flow of things to catch them. It categorizes, this is a wolf, this is a rock, this is an enemy. It freezes the world so we can manipulate it.
Like taking a photograph of a bird in flight. You get the image, the static position of the wings, but you lose the actual movement, the flight itself.
That is the perfect analogy. You can study the immobile position of the wings in the photo, but you cannot reconstruct the flight from a pile of photos. You can't understand movement by studying an infinite series of immobile positions.
So the intellect gives us a dead model of a living world.
Correct. And that is fine for building bridges or doing your taxes, but it is terrible for understanding life or consciousness or art. If you try to understand your own soul using only your intellect, you will just find a pile of dead parts.
So what is the alternative? What is intuition? Because when I hear the word intuition, I think of a gut feeling. Or, just guessing.
And that is the common misunderstanding he fought against his whole life. For Bergson, intuition is not a vague feeling. It is a rigorous, difficult mental effort.
An effort.
Yes, it is the effort to enter into the object of your thought, to sympathize with it, to experience it from the inside out.
The outline gave a great metaphor for this, swimming.
It's the perfect example, I think. Imagine you want to understand what swimming is. You can stand on the shore and analyze the water. You can study the physics of buoyancy and displacement. You can watch videos of Michael Phelps. You can memorize the mechanics of the arm stroke. That is the intellect at work.
But you still don't know how to swim. You don't know what it feels like.
No. You can't deduce the experience of swimming from the laws of physics. To know swimming, you have to throw yourself into the water. You have to struggle against the current. You have to feel the water supporting you.
You're about to get wet.
You have to enter the element. He says the intellect is for walking on solid ground. It deals with concepts, logic, solid objects. Intuition is for swimming, for entering the fluid nature of reality itself.
There was another metaphor about a city that I liked that really clicked for me.
The city of Paris metaphor, yes. He says the intellect is like taking 1,000 photographs of Paris from every conceivable angle. You can gather all those photos and build a perfect 3D model, but it will never equal the experience of actually walking down a street in Paris, smelling the bread from a bakery, hearing the noise of the traffic.
The model is not the reality, no matter how good the model is.
Exactly. And Bergson says we spend our whole lives living in the model. We live in the labels and concepts we put on things. Intuition is the difficult attempt to rip off the label and get back to the thing itself.
It sounds almost meditative, like a Zen practice. Stop categorizing the world and just be in the world for a moment.
It is deeply related to artistic and mystical experience. It's why he won the Nobel Prize in literature, not in physics. He was asking us to read the world like a poem, not like an instruction manual. You can analyze the grammar and the meter of a poem all day long, but unless you enter the rhythm and feeling of it, you haven't really read the poem.
This idea of stiff logic versus fluid life actually leads to one of his most accessible and, frankly, most fun books, which is about something we all do but rarely think about, laughing.
Yes. Le Rire, Laughter, published in 1900.
It's kind of funny, pun intended, that this serious metaphysician who is wrestling with time and free will also wrote the definitive book on comedy. What is his theory? Why do we laugh?
Well, keeping in mind his central obsession with life being fluid and mechanism being rigid, he argues that laughter is triggered when we see something mechanical encrusted on the living.
Mechanical encrusted on the living. Unpack that for me. It's a bit of a mouthful.
Okay. A human being is supposed to be alert, adaptive, and fluid. We are supposed to have that quality of duration we talked about. But sometimes people act like machines. They fall into rigid habits, they get distracted, they fail to adapt to their environment, they become stiff when they should be flexible.
Give me an example. The classic slipping on a banana peel.
The absolute classic. Why is a man walking down the street and slipping on a peel funny? It's not just schadenfreude, a pleasure in his pain. It's because a living, aware human being should see the peel and step over it.
They should adapt.
But when he slips, physics takes over. Gravity and inertia treat him like a sack of potatoes. For a split second, the human becomes an object. the soul becomes a machine, and we laugh at that moment of rigidity.
So we are laughing at the inflexibility, at the failure to be alive and aware.
Precisely. We are mocking the failure to be human. Think of a bureaucrat who demands you fill out Form 27B in triplicate, even though the building is on fire. That is funny because he is acting like a robot, programmed to follow a rule regardless of the fluid reality of the situation.
So laughter is a social corrective. It's a way to keep people in line.
Yes. And this is the darker side of Bergson's theory. He says laughter isn't moral, it's not nice, it's actually a form of social bullying, in a way.
Bullying, that's a strong word.
Well, think about it. It's a tool society uses to force conformity and flexibility. When we laugh at someone, we are humiliating them. We are sending a clear and often painful signal. Wake up! Stop acting like a machine. Be flexible. Pay attention to the rest of us.
That explains so much about internet culture today. All the cringe videos. We watch people lacking self-awareness, people acting weirdly or rigidly in social situations, and we laugh. We are collectively policing them.
Exactly. We are punishing them for not flowing with the social rhythm. It's a mechanism to ensure the group stays fluid and adaptive.
It really fits his whole worldview perfectly.
Yeah.
Rigidity is the enemy, whether it's in our concept of time, in our philosophy, or in our social behavior.
Precisely. And this battle between the fluid and the rigid explodes onto the biggest stage possible in his masterpiece, Creative Evolution.
This book was a monster hit. A bestseller. The notes say 21 editions in 10 years. This is the book that really cemented his status as the philosopher of life.
Published in 1907, and here he takes on the biggest scientific debate of the age, evolution.
Now, we already mentioned he accepted evolution. He wasn't a creationist fighting against Darwin.
No, not at all. He fully accepted that life evolved over millions of years. But he hated the way the scientists of his day were explaining how it happened.
Who were the main contenders in this debate?
You had two main camps. On one side, you had mechanism. This was the hardline Darwinian view, championed by people like Herbert Spencer. They saw evolution as nothing but random, determined forces. The past pushes the present. It's all accidental mutations and blind environmental pressure.
So we're just being kicked forward from behind by a series of accidents.
Right. And on the other side, you had finalism. This is an older idea that goes back to philosophers like Leibniz. This is the idea that evolution is following a pre-written program, that there is a specific goal, a telos, that is pulling the present toward the future.
Like an acorn having a blueprint inside it to become an oak tree.
Exactly. So your only two choices are either we are accidental robots or we are puppets following a script written by God or nature.
And Bergson comes in and says, they are both wrong.
He says there are two sides of the same bad coin.
Why? What's the common error?
Because both of them assume that everything is given in advance. In mechanism, the final outcome is determined by the starting atoms. In finalism, the final outcome is determined by the end goal. In neither case is there any true surprise. There is no true creation, no novelty.
And Bergson, as we've seen, wanted a universe where genuine novelty is possible.
He believed that time-real duration unravels unforeseen possibilities. He believed that life isn't following a script. It is writing the script as it goes along.
This brings us to his most famous and probably most controversial term, the Élan Vital.
The vital impetus, or vital impulse.
I feel like this term gets misused a lot or just thrown around. What is it exactly? Is it a ghost? Is it some magical energy beam shooting through things?
It's not a physical force like gravity that you can measure with an instrument. It's more of a description of the nature of life itself. Bergson sees life as a current, an explosive, creative tendency that pushes through matter, organizing it.
He used the symphony analogy here too, didn't he?
Yes, and it's a great one. He says, imagine a composer writing a symphony. Does the composer know the entire symphony before he starts writing it?
No. If he knew it, he wouldn't have to write it. The act of writing is the act of discovery.
Exactly. The creation of the symphony is a journey. The effect creates its cause, as he puts it. Life invents new forms to solve problems it encounters. It pushes out, it runs into obstacles, it splits into contradictory tendencies.
These contradictory tendencies, what does that mean?
Think of a shell exploding. One fragment goes left, one goes right. Bergson says life itself split early on. Plants went one way. They decided to store energy from the sun and stay still. Animals went another way. They decided to expend energy and move around.
And then animals split again.
Yes. He saw another great split. One path went toward instinct. That's the insects, the bees, the ants. They are perfectly programmed, they build incredible societies, but they are rigid. An ant can't decide to become a poet. The other path went toward intellect. That's us. the vertebrates, and especially humans. Flexible, tool-making, but disconnected from our intuition.
So humans aren't the goal of evolution. We aren't the peak of the pyramid in his view.
Absolutely not. We are just one successful path that the Élan Vital blasted open. We are the path where life figured out how to liberate consciousness from the automatic reflexes of matter. But we aren't the point of the universe. An ant colony is just as much a triumph of the Élan Vital as we are, just in a different direction.
It's a beautiful, chaotic image. Life is this sprawling, tree-like explosion. But I can see why it upset a lot of people.
Oh, it upset everyone. The scientists, the hardline biologists thought it sounded too mystical. Vital impulse sounds like magic to a biologist who wants to study genes and proteins.
And what about the church?
The Catholic Church banned all his major books in 1914. They put them on the index of prohibited books.
Which is so ironic because he was trying to save spirituality from materialism.
The problem for them was that they accused him of pantheism. They thought he was saying that God is the process of evolution, that God is making himself up as he goes along. The church wanted a God who sits outside of time, perfect and unchanging. Bergson's God was too active, too involved in the messy, unpredictable business of creation.
So he's got the scientists mad at him for being too spiritual, and the church mad at him for being the wrong kind of spiritual. He must have been doing something interesting.
And despite the academic and religious critics, the public absolutely loved it. It gave them a sense that their lives had cosmic meaning, that they were part of a grand, creative unfolding. It made people feel alive again.
This fame brought him into contact with the other giants of the age. We mentioned Proust, but he also had a fascinating relationship with William James, the great American psychologist and philosopher.
That was a true intellectual bromance. They met in London in 1908. James was 17 years older, a legend in his own right, the father of American psychology. But he hailed Bergson as a modern-day genius.
I read a quote where James said Bergson led him to renounce the intellectualist method.
And to give up logic. Can you imagine a world-famous philosopher saying, I gave up logic because of this guy? James felt that Bergson had finally provided the rigorous philosophical language for the stream of consciousness that Jen had been studying in psychology. They reinforced each other's work perfectly.
But then there was the collision. The moment the music for Bergson kind of stopped.
The Einstein debate, April 6th, 1922.
We have to dramatize this because it feels like a turning point, not just for Bergson, but for 20th century intellectual history.
It really was. You have the Société Française de Philosophie in Paris, a packed room. On one side of the stage, you have Henri Bergson, the reigning king of philosophy, Nobel laureate to be. On the other, you have Albert Einstein, the new superstar of physics, fresh off his proof of general relativity.
What was the beef? What was the disagreement about?
Well, Bergson had written a book called Duration and Simultaneity. He was trying to reconcile his concept of duration with Einstein's special relativity, and he wasn't saying the math was wrong. He was trying to say, look, Professor Einstein, your theory is brilliant physics, but it is a theory about clocks. It's about how we measure time from different frames of reference. It doesn't explain the time we actually live.
He was trying to save a space for human experience alongside the cold, hard physics.
He was arguing that before you can measure time with a clock, you have to have a consciousness that experiences the passage of time, a single, universal, flowing time. He said, with no consciousness, there is no time. The physicist's time is a concept derived from this primary experience.
And how did Einstein take that?
Not well. It was all very polite and academic, but it was brutal. Einstein stood up and delivered a line that, in many ways, put a nail in Bergson's popular coffin. He said, quite simply, the time of the philosophers does not exist.
Ouch. That's a direct hit.
He effectively said, there's psychological time, which is just a subjective illusion happening in your head, and there's physical time, the time of the physicist. And physical time is the only one that is real.
And the room sided with Einstein. The zeitgeist sided with Einstein.
The world sided with Einstein. This was the moment the 20th century decided, if you can't measure it, it isn't real. Physics became the queen of the sciences, and philosophy was demoted.
That is a tragedy in a way, because we gained nuclear power and GPS and space travel from Einstein's view. But did we lose something essential in the process?
We lost the philosophical validity of our own experience. We started trusting the instrument more than the user. If you feel sad, but your brain scan says you're fine, we are trained to trust the scan. Bergson would say that is a form of insanity.
It feels like we are still living in the wreckage of that debate. We prioritize quantifiable data over qualitative intuition every single day in almost every field.
We absolutely do. And for Bergson, personally, it was a disaster. Critics started saying he didn't understand the math, which was only partly true. He understood it, he just interpreted its philosophical meaning differently. But the narrative set in. Bergson was a relic of the past. Einstein was the future.
But Bergson didn't just disappear into a hole. He was still a major public figure.
It was. He pivoted, in a way. He became a diplomat. He was the first president of the International Committee on Intellectual Cooperation, which was the direct ancestor of UNESCO. He worked with Einstein and Marie Curie on international peace and scientific collaboration.
So he worked with the man who bested him.
He did. He even helped negotiate the U.S. entry into World War I on a mission for the French government. He was a man of the world. But his final years, this is where the story stops being about philosophy and starts being about profound moral character.
It really does. By the 1930s, Bergson is an old man. He's suffering from severe rheumatism. The notes say he was half paralyzed. He wins the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1927, but he can't even travel to Stockholm to accept it in person.
And then the dark clouds of World War II gather over Europe.
He wrote his last great work, The Two Sources of Morality and Religion, in 1932. In it, he moves toward mysticism. He basically argues that the ultimate expression of the Élan Vital is love, universal charity, the open soul versus the closed society.
And in his personal life, this intellectual journey was leading him toward Catholicism.
Yes. In his will, which he wrote in 1937, he revealed that his thinking had brought him very, very close to converting to Catholicism. He called it the perfect complement to Judaism. He felt it was the spiritual completion of his own philosophy. But he didn't convert.
No, and the reason he gave is just. It's heartbreakingly noble. He saw the rise of Nazism in Germany. He saw the virulent anti-Semitism sweeping across Europe. And he wrote in his will, "I wanted to remain among those who tomorrow will be persecuted."
That is profound solidarity. He chose to stay with his people in their darkest hour, even though his own spiritual beliefs were shifting.
It gets even more powerful. 1940. The Nazis occupy Paris. The collaborationist Vichy government takes over. They immediately pass these vile anti-Semitic laws. Jews have to register with the police. They are fired from all academic posts.
But Bergson is a national treasure. He's the most famous French philosopher alive, a Nobel laureate.
Exactly. The French government, embarrassed, offers him an exemption. They tell him, you don't have to register. You don't have to resign your honors. You are Henri Bergson. These laws don't apply to you.
And what did he do?
He refused. He said he would not accept any treatment different from that of his people. He renounced all his honors, he resigned all his posts, and then in December of 1940, completely frail, sick, barely able to stand without excruciating pain, he had himself carried to the police station.
To register as a Jew.
To register. He stood in that long line in the freezing cold, and on the form, under the line for occupation, he wrote, academic, philosopher, Nobel Prize winner, Jew.
That gives me chills. That is such a powerful act of defiance, asserting his identity at the very moment it was most dangerous.
It was his final argument, wasn't it? He lived his philosophy. Life is action. Life is affirmation. He died just a few weeks later, in January 1941, of bronchitis that the doctors said was caused by that exposure to the cold.
A Catholic priest said prayers at his funeral, per his request, but he died as a Jew, in solidarity.
It's a heroic end to an incredible life. But after the war, he kind of faded away. The intellectual climate changed. The existentialists took over. Sartre, Camus, they were the new cool kids on the block.
And Bergson was seen as irrationalist or vitalist, which became dirty words in philosophy.
Bertrand Russell mocked him relentlessly. He called Bergson's work emotive speculation. The analytic philosophers took over the universities in the English-speaking world, and they wanted logic and language, not intuition and poetry.
So why are we talking about him now? Why is he popping up in 2026? What sparked the revival?
A few key reasons. First, and most importantly in the world of philosophy, was Gilles Deleuze. In the 1960s, he wrote a book called Bergsonism that basically rescued Bergson from the trash heap of intellectual history.
What did Deleuze do?
He showed that Bergson wasn't just a fuzzy mystic, he was a rigorous thinker of difference and becoming. He made Bergson cool again for a whole new generation of thinkers.
And science kind of caught up again, didn't it?
It did, in a big way. We already mentioned quantum mechanics, but later came complexity theory and chaos theory. Scientists studying complex systems like the weather or the stock market or biology started realizing that the old mechanical, linear view of cause and effect just doesn't work.
Right. Bead A hitting bead B isn't enough to explain a hurricane.
Exactly. And Ilya Prigogine, who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, explicitly cited Bergson's influence.
Really?
Yes. Prigogine said that physics had to rediscover the arrow of time, the idea that time only moves one way and creates irreversible changes and novelty. That is pure Bergson.
And I have to imagine artificial intelligence is a big part of this revival today.
It's huge. We are building these incredible machines, large language models, neural networks. They are the absolute triumph of the Bergsonian intellect. They are the ultimate net thrown over reality. They analyze billions of static data points from the past.
But they don't have intuition. They don't have duration.
They don't swim. They don't experience that snowball of consciousness. They predict the next word in a sentence based on the statistical probability of all the previous words they've seen. But they don't have the lived, felt snowball of consciousness. They simulate, but they don't live. Bergson predicts exactly why AI, for all its brilliance, feels hollow.
It's the difference between a perfect map of Paris and actually walking in Paris.
Yeah.
AI is the best map ever made, but it's still just a map.
Exactly. And as we merge more and more with our technology, we need Bergson to remind us of what parts of us cannot be digitized or calculated.
There's also a connection to Eastern philosophy that I found really interesting in the notes.
Yes, many scholars, especially in recent years, have noted the deep parallels with traditions like Vedanta or Buddhism. The idea that the self is a flow, not a static thing. Sri Aurobindo, the Indian philosopher and mystic, had a very similar view of a creative, integrative evolution. You could say Bergson was trying to heal the split between the spiritual and the material in the West, a project which Eastern traditions had been engaged in for millennia.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, and this is a truly deep one, what is the big takeaway? If I'm driving to work right now or washing the dishes, what should I take from Henri Bergson into my day?
I think it's an invitation to change how you view your own life. Bergson asks us to stop freezing the world, stop looking at your life as a series of checkpoints on a timeline, school, job, marriage, retirement, death. That's spatial time. That's just the beads on a string.
Instead, jump in the water.
Jump in the water. Feel the duration. Trust your intuition. Understand that you are a part of a creative evolution that is still happening right now, through you. You aren't a machine following a program. You are an artist creating a moment that has never existed before in the history of the universe.
I love that. And here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on as we finish. We live in the age of algorithms, predictive modeling, big data. The entire goal of big tech is to predict what you will buy, what you will watch, and who you will vote for.
Which is the ultimate triumph of mechanism and finalism, isn't it? The algorithm looks at your past to predict your future. It assumes you are a closed loop, a predictable machine.
Exactly. But Bergson argued that time unravels unforeseen possibilities, that true novelty is always possible. So, is the algorithm right? Are you just the sum of your data points? Or is there an Élan Vital in you that can do something the data never ever predicted?
That is the question, isn't it? Are you living by the clock or are you living by the melody?
I think I'm going to go listen to some music and try to forget what time it is. Thanks for diving deep with us.
A real pleasure.
See you in the next Deep Dive.
Welcome to The Debate. I want you to picture a scene in Paris, right around 1910. The street outside the Collège de France is just gridlocked. You've got horse-drawn carriages tangled up with these, very early automobiles. Inside, society ladies have sent their servants 5 hours early just to hold a seat. And they're not there for a concert. They aren't there for a political rally. They are there to listen to a philosopher.
A man who, for a very brief window, was, well, arguably the most famous intellectual on the planet, Henri Bergson.
He was really the first rock star philosopher. I mean, he won the Nobel Prize in Literature. He was read by everyone from Marcel Proust to Theodore Roosevelt. And then almost as quickly as he rose, he just sort of vanished from the curriculum.
Only to be resurrected every 30 years or so by people who find science a bit too cold for their liking.
He returns because the question he asked is the one we still haven't really answered. It's the ghost in the machine of our modern world. And the question is this: is reality a mechanism? Is the universe just a giant clock, ticking away based on fixed laws? Or is it a continuous, creative, unpredictable flow that our science is simply too rigid to capture?
Right. To put it in modern terms, are we biological robots running a complex script, or is there actually something extra going on? I'm here to argue the former. I'm taking the side of the rationalists. Bergson's philosophy is beautiful. I will absolutely grant you that. It's poetic. But he asks us to abandon the precision of the intellect for this vague feeling he calls intuition. And historically, whenever we trade rigorous analysis for gut feelings, we end up in trouble.
And I'm here to argue that Bergson was right, and that his warning is actually more relevant now than it was in 1910. We have let the machine model of the universe blind us to the actual experience of being alive. We're obsessed with measuring, quantifying, and predicting. Bergson argues that while that's great for building bridges, it's terrible for understanding life. We treat life like a math problem, but it's actually a melody.
A melody doesn't keep the lights on. Math does. But all right, let's get into the weeds. Where do we even start with this?
We have to start with his most famous concept, time. But not time as you see it on your watch. Bergson called it duration, or in French, durée.
Right. And this is the core disagreement.
Bergson argues that we have all committed a fundamental error in how we think. We have spatialized time. I mean, think about how you visualize history, or even just your day. You probably imagine a line. You put dots on it. 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m. You're treating time as if it were space, a container that you can slice up into little static units.
Because that is how reality functions. I mean, if I don't cut time into hours and minutes, I don't show up for this recording. Physics, logistics, engineering, they all rely on treating time as a variable, little t. It's a coordinate. It has to be measurable or it's useless.
Useless for calculation, maybe, but is it true? Bergson says no. He says that by cutting time into static slices, you kill it. You stop the flow. Real time, the time you are experiencing right now as you listen to this, is a continuous melt. It's like a snowball rolling down a snowy hill. The snow of the past isn't left behind. It's gathered up into the ball. The past is constantly, as he says, gnawing into the future. It's an accumulation, not a sequence of distinct dots.
I've read the snowball metaphor. It's evocative. But if we strip away the poetry for a second, what is he actually claiming? If I measure a second and then I measure another second, I have 2 seconds. The feeling that they are all connected doesn't change the physics of the clock. It sounds like he's just complaining that math feels cold.
No, he's saying math is blind to the essence of movement. He uses the metaphor of the city to explain this distinction between intellect and intuition.
The photos versus the walk, yeah.
Exactly. Imagine you want to understand Paris. You can take 10,000 photographs of the city from every possible angle. You can categorize the architecture, map the sewers, measure the height of the Eiffel Tower to the millimeter. That is analysis. That is the intellect at work. You are circling the object, taking snapshots.
And if I do that, I have a very accurate, very functional understanding of Paris. I can navigate it. I can renovate it.
It has a duration. The feeling of the city, the flow of it, can only be grasped by entering it, by using intuition. You, the rationalist, are standing outside looking at photos. Bergson is walking the street.
I see the appeal of that, truly. It's the difference between reading the menu and eating the steak. But here's the problem, and it's one that the philosopher George Santayana pointed out ruthlessly. If I am an urban planner or a structural engineer, I don't need the feeling of the walk. I need the map. I need the static, frozen measurements. If we rely on Bergson's intuition, we might have a lovely spiritual experience, but the bridge falls down.
But Bergson isn't telling you to burn the map. He never said, don't use analysis for solids. He said, don't confuse the map with the territory. He argued that when we apply this snapshot thinking to motion, we create paradoxes that logic literally cannot solve. I mean, look at Zeno's paradox.
The ancient Greek puzzle, the arrow that never hits the target.
Right, and let's just break that down for people because it proves Bergson's point about how our brains malfunction. Zeno argued that if you shoot an arrow at a target, it can never get there. Why? Because before it goes the whole way, it has to go halfway.
Correct.
And before it goes the rest of the way, it has to go half of that distance, and half of that, and half of that. There are an infinite number of halves in any amount of space. So logically, if time and space are made of points, the arrow has to cross an infinity of points.
But we solved Zeno. We invented calculus. We learned how to sum an infinite series. We used the very intellect Bergson criticizes to solve the problem. The math works.
Bergson would say calculus is just a sharper pair of scissors. You're still treating the movement as a line made of points. You're just making the points really, really small. In creative evolution, he says you can't learn to swim by sitting on the shore calculating fluid dynamics. You have to jump in. The intellect is a tool for solids, for static things. It fails when it tries to grasp life. The arrow moves because movement is indivisible. It's one single gesture. The halves only exist in your mind, not in the arrow.
That is a dangerous statement. It suggests that analysis is a fiction. But let's pivot to where this thinking applies to something more tangible, evolution. Because this is where Bergson really stepped into the ring with the scientific establishment, and where I think he got a bloody nose.
The Élan Vital.
The vital impulse. This is the concept that got him accused of mysticism.
It's the concept that saves biology from being a machine.
What's the concept that inserts a ghost into the machine? I mean, Bergson looked at evolution. He accepted Darwin, mostly, but he decided that natural selection just wasn't enough. He claimed there must be some internal spiritual push, driving life toward complexity.
He wasn't rejecting Darwin. He was rejecting the gloom of mechanism. Look at the prevailing view of his time, which was largely driven by Herbert Spencer. They viewed the universe as a billiard table. Atoms hit atoms, causes lead to effects, and everything is determined by what happened before. If that's true, and I want listeners to really think about this, if that is true, then the entire history of life, every species, every poem, this very conversation we are having, was already pre-calculated in the Big Bang.
That's determinism. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but physics supports it. If you know the position and speed of every particle and the laws of interaction, the future is just the result of the past.
Bergson says, look at the reality of life. Look at the invention. Life isn't just a reshuffling of old parts. It creates absolute novelty. He uses the example of the eye.
The eye is the classic creationist argument, though. It's too complex to be random.
But Bergson isn't a creationist in the religious sense. He's not saying a designer built it like a watchmaker. He asks, how does a specific species of scallop and a human being both develop a complex eye with a retina and lens along completely different evolutionary lines? If evolution is just accidental mutations being filtered by the environment, that is a staggering coincidence.
It's not a coincidence. It's convergent evolution. Light exists. Organisms that can detect light survive better. The environment shapes the tool. We don't need a mystical vital force to explain why eyes are useful. We need genes, mutation, and time.
But you're missing the why. Why does life bother getting more complex? A single-celled organism is perfectly adapted. It survives, it reproduces, it's immortal, in a way. If mechanism were true, life should have stopped there. Why the explosion of diversity? Why the risk? Bergson says life is an effort to graft freedom onto matter. It's an improvisation. The Élan Vital is that thrust. It's an explosive force pushing outward, trying to overcome the drag of matter.
Improvisation. That's the key word you keep using. You're describing the universe like a jazz musician.
Yes, because jazz is created in the moment. It's not on a sheet of paper until after it's played.
But the universe acts like a clock. And this is where Bergson got into trouble with more than just the scientists. In 1914, the Vatican put all 3 of his major books on the Index of Prohibited Books. That is a rare achievement, to be hated by the materialist scientists and the Catholic Church at the same time.
Well, it makes perfect sense. He threatened the dogmas of both.
The Church accused him of pantheism. They saw his creative evolution and realized the implication. If God is this vital force making things up as he goes along, then God isn't omniscient. God is just figuring it out. It collapsed the creator into the creation.
But Bergson was trying to save free will. If God has a plan, that's finalism. Or if the universe is a machine, that's mechanism, then we are just puppets. In both cases, the future is already written. Bergson insists that the future is open. It is being written right now. God, or the force, is creating itself through us.
But look at the cost of that freedom. You have to strip the human mind of its power to analyze truth. And this is my biggest issue with Bergsonism. He claims the intellect, our ability to use logic, categorize, and define, is not a window to truth.
He calls it a practical faculty.
Because it is. I mean, think about evolution. Why did we evolve a brain? Was it to solve abstract metaphysical riddles? No, it was to survive. It was to hunt, to build shelters, to escape predators.
I agree with that. The brain is a survival engine.
So our intellect is designed to manipulate solid matter. We cut up the world so we can eat it or build with it. We are hardwired to see the world as a collection of dead, static objects because that helps us control them. But when we turn that tool, which is designed for dead matter, onto living things, we misinterpret them. We treat a person like a machine. We treat time like a ruler.
So we are smart enough to build the Eiffel Tower, but too dumb to understand why we built it?
We are smart enough to build the tower, but we look at a bird in flight and try to understand it as a mechanical glider, missing the essence of the life within it. Bergson has a wonderful proof of this in his essay on laughter. Why is it funny when a man slips on a banana peel?
Slapstick. It's classic comedy.
But why? Bergson says we laugh specifically when the mechanical is encrusted on the living. We expect a human to be fluid, alert, adaptive. When he slips, he becomes a falling object. He becomes rigid. He becomes a machine. We laugh because our intuition knows that life shouldn't be mechanical. The laughter is a corrective. It's society saying, wake up, be fluid, stop acting like a robot.
That is a brilliant psychological observation. I'll give him that. It explains the uncanny valley, too. But does it justify throwing out logic? You're using a very sophisticated logical argument right now to tell me that logic is invalid. It's a performative contradiction.
Well, I'm using the ladder to climb up so I can kick it away.
That's exactly what William James tried to do. He was Bergson's biggest fan in America. He said Bergson made him give up logic squarely and irrevocably. But look where that leads. James's own students, people like Horace Callan, eventually realized that if you give up logic, you have no way to verify anything. If I say I feel the vital force and you say I don't, the conversation ends. We're just trading diary entries. Civilization requires a shared map, not just individual feelings.
But the map keeps changing. You cling to scientific truth. But look what happened to the science Bergson criticized. He fought against the billiard ball physics of the 19th century. And guess what? That physics is dead. Quantum mechanics killed it.
Hold on. You're skipping over the biggest defeat in Bergson's career. You can't talk about physics without talking about Einstein.
Ah, the 1922 debate.
It was the showdown of the century. Bergson versus Einstein at the French Society of Philosophy. Bergson tried to argue that relativity, Einstein's masterpiece, was limited because it only dealt with measured time, not lived time. He tried to say there was a universal time that everyone feels.
Which is true. We do feel it.
And Einstein just destroyed him. He replied with one sentence: "The time of the philosophers does not exist." He meant that there is no universal flow. Time is relative to speed and gravity. If I move fast enough, my time literally slows down compared to yours. That is a mathematical fact. It's not a feeling. The scientific community rallied around Einstein, and Bergson was viewed as a relic, an old man trying to argue with math using poetry. It was so embarrassing that later, Bergson's book on the topic was excluded from his collected works.
It was excluded, yes, but history is swinging back. The philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty and later Deleuze argued that Einstein and Bergson were talking past each other. Einstein was describing how to measure light. Bergson was describing the phenomenology of existence. Einstein explains the clock. Bergson explains why we care what time it is.
That sounds like a participation trophy. You're both right.
No, look at the science. Louis de Broglie, who won the Nobel for Physics, said Bergson anticipated quantum mechanics by 40 years. Why? Because quantum mechanics tells us that at the fundamental level, matter isn't made of tiny billiard balls. It's made of waves. It's made of vibrations. It is indeterminate until it is observed. That is exactly what Bergson meant by duration and creative evolution. The universe is not a clock, it's a cloud of possibilities.
You are doing quite a bit of retrofitting there. Saying vibrations sounds like quantum theory, sure. But Bergson wasn't doing the math, he was guessing.
He was using intuition. That's the entire point. He grasped the nature of reality before the math caught up.
Or he got lucky with a metaphor. Look, even if I grant you that the clockwork universe is dead, we didn't kill it with poetry. We killed it with better math. Chaos theory, complexity theory, nonlinear dynamics, These are rigorous mathematical fields. They don't rely on an Élan Vital. They rely on equations. We can model the unpredictability.
But they describe a world that acts like Bergson said it did, a world where the future is unpredictable, a world where small variations lead to massive, novel outcomes.
I will concede that the arrogance of 19th century science, the idea that we could predict every future event like a script, was wrong. Bergson saw that arrogance and called it out.
It helps us remain human in that obsession with control, and this is why he matters today. We are obsessed with algorithms. We want to predict the stock market, predict our health, predict what video we want to watch next. We are trying to turn our lives into machines. We track our sleep, our steps, our calories. Bergson reminds us that we are not machines.
But we are also not wizards. I worry that Bergsonism is just a comforting bedtime story. It tells us, don't worry about the hard limits of biology or physics. You are pure creative energy. It feels good, it sells books, but does it help us navigate a world that runs on silicon and electricity? If I ignore the algorithm of my health, I might die of a preventable disease.
It helps us remain human in that world. It helps us remember that the self isn't just a series of data points.
Perhaps. But data points save lives.
Let's go back to the symphony one last time. Bergson says your life is a composition. The notes of the past are written. They determine the key, the rhythm. You can't change them. But the next note, the very next one, that is not on the page yet. You have to write it. It is radical responsibility.
And I suppose my role is to remind you that you still have to follow the rules of harmony. You can't just smash the keys and call it music.
Fair enough. We need the structure. But we are the music.
A poetic truth. I can accept that.
It has been a pleasure debating the nature of reality with you.
The pleasure was all mine, even if I'm still checking my watch.
And to our listeners, we leave you with this. Are you living your life as a machine to be optimized or a melody to be composed?
Thank you for joining the debate.
Until next time.